أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعن الله الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام. Respected elders, brothers, sisters, we've gathered here once again on this evening for a majlis to commemorate the martyrdom and tragedies of the month of Muharram and the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his companions. May Allah reward you for your good intentions in participating in this majlis. I wanted to begin tonight's lecture with a story. Stories can be a great source of inspiration for us, and sometimes there's certain stories that really stick with us, and this is one of those stories that personally for me, I find inspiration in it. It's a story that goes back about 100 years, where there was a great scholar by the name of Sayyid Abdul Hadi al-Shirazi who was living in the holy city of Najaf. And in his dars, in his lessons, he would sometimes mention small anecdotes to teach and to educate and inspire his students. One of his students narrates that at one of the classes that I went to, the Sayyid, he told us that his brother-in-law, Sayyid Ja'far, had passed away. And he said that now that he's passed away, I want to tell you a story about him. You know, sometimes these great figures, they have certain things that happen to them and somebody finds out about it, so they beg them, they say that please don't tell anybody about this. But if I die and you find it's something that's useful, then you can share it with others. So the Sayyid Abdul Hadi Shirazi, he says that, well, now that my brother-in-law has passed away, I can share a story about him with you. So what is the story he tells about his brother-in-law? He says that it was the first night of Muharram. So imagine a night just like last night. And he says, this scholar, he says, I saw a dream. And in the dream, it was a scene from the Day of Judgment. And there was two angels who were setting down two chairs. And soon enough, there was two great beings who entered and sat on those two chairs. One of them was Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam, and the other one was Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And Hazrat Abbas had a notebook where he was writing down names. So he says, I was witnessing that this exchange that was happening between Hazrat Abbas and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And Hazrat Abbas has the notebook and he's putting down names. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam tells him that this name right here, scratch it out. And instead, put the name of Sayyid Ja'far. Who's Sayyid Ja'far? Sayyid Ja'far is the brother-in-law of Sayyid Abdul Hadi al-Shirazi, the one who's saying the story. He says that I see that Imam Hussein alayhi salam orders his brother Abbas to put the name of my brother-in-law on that notebook in place of somebody else. He is one of the people who remembers us. So that was the dream. And Sayyid Abdul Hadi says that when I woke up from the dream, it was something that was unclear to me. What does this actually mean? So when I went, and next time I had the opportunity, I spoke to my brother-in-law, Sayyid Ja'far. So Sayyid Ja'far is moved by the dream that his brother-in-law sees. And then he tells him what this represented. He says to his brother-in-law that I am not somebody who has ever gone on the mimbar and delivered the zikr of musibat. I never mentioned the tragedies of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That's just not something that I ever felt comfortable doing. But I knew about the rewards of doing so. I knew about the hadiths that mention man baka or abka or tabaka, that whoever causes somebody to weep, or somebody who weeps, or somebody who even emotionally is connected but tears don't come to their eyes, falahul jannah, and that person, for them, is jannah, is paradise. So I knew about this hadith, but I just wasn't the type of person. I didn't want to, I couldn't. But I thought that, I want to get that reward. I want to participate in this. I don't want to be, as we talked about last night, a spectator. So he says that I decided that I wanted to do something about it. I asked around for a book of maqtal, one meaning a book that would describe the events that took place in the tragedy of Imam Hussein Islam. And finally, one of my friends had an extra one. I borrowed it from him. I went home and I told my family that this Muharram, every night, you gather and I will read from this book and do the zikr of musibat. I'll mention these tragedies for you. It won't be something that's for the public. I'll do it for you. I feel comfortable at that level. So he realizes that because of that, what he thought was an insignificant thing, he's just doing a family thing. That was something that was enough to put him on that list of the people who remembered Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And then he asked, or somehow, he was talking about the person who was crossed out from that list. Who was that person? And the scholar, the Sayyid Abdul Hadi, he says that was somebody who was doing this, but then he decided to stop doing it. So he got taken off of that list. What's the takeaway that we can get from this story? At least personally, what I take from this is a reminder about the importance and the sanctity of these types of gatherings. And truly, this is a great spiritual opportunity that Allah Ta'ala has given us. That's something that we can be thankful for. We ask Allah Ta'ala to allow us to benefit from this blessing in the best way possible. Please recite salawat. Brothers and sisters, last night I focused on talking about some of the recommended etiquettes to be able to, and best practices to benefit most from the majalis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We talked about things like giving it that respect. We talked about the idea of it can be taken and become an act of ibadah. We talked about how we want to make sure we're very welcoming to those who come to these gatherings, really reach out and practice the akhlaq of inclusion that was taught to us by even Imam Hussein Islam himself. We talked about that last night. I'm going to mention one more point before we move on to the main topic, which is the divine promises of Allah. And this is an important point. I feel it's very relevant. We are in the age of, short clips and Instagram celebrities and influencers. And of course, we find that this type of culture of finding people who can speak very eloquently and beautifully is found even within the speakers of the Shia world. You have international competitions now where people from the followers of Ahlul Bayt they gather together, they compete with each other to see who can recite Quran, to see who can recite Latmiyah, but also you find this component of people giving speeches, and it's become something which is a type of art form, or let's say a talent show. Who can give the most powerful speech? And I think it's very important. I feel it's essential to mention this point, that on one hand, we appreciate when somebody takes that effort to do their research and to think about how they can present their content in a way which is very powerful and very impactful. We have to be careful. Brothers and sisters, when you study language and speech, they say that there's 3 components that make a good speech. I'm sure you've heard this before. Logos, ethos, and pathos. Yes? Okay. No? Okay, I'll explain. These are Greek words. Logos means that if you want to give a speech, this is what you'll study this when you study like English language and literature and rhetoric. They say a great speech consists of 3 things. Number 1 is that it has to have logos, meaning that it has to have content which clicks with the logic of the people that you're talking to. If you say something that they find doesn't work for them, they're like, wait, that's wrong, then you're not going to be effective in your speech. That's number 1. Number 2 is ethos. Ethos meaning that what matters when you're giving a speech is the authority of the person who's speaking, right? I mean, if you go to a park and you see, somebody just standing on the top of a bench and saying words, even if they're speaking very eloquently and they're talking about things which seem profound and, they, let's say, are talking about things which make sense, are you going to give them that much regard? No, because it's a guy on top of a park bench, right? So that is the ethos. And the third thing is the pathos. Pathos meaning that the ability to connect emotionally with the listeners. If you find somebody who is very dry, they're just very boring, kind of like reading from an encyclopedia or reading from a phone book, right? Then you'll be like, okay, well, even if they have the most profound things to say, I can't really get into it, right? And this is what you learn in the secular sciences. And then sometimes they give examples of great speakers. Have you guys heard of Winston Churchill? Yes? Okay. Winston Churchill is a famous statesman from which country? That's right. They say that this man was just incredible. And, even in my program, my educational program, they gave us him as an example of an exemplary leader, right? Because he was so powerful, he gave these speeches after, whatever, all these things about him. Now here's somebody who is famous for having all 3 things. He had the ethos because he was the head of state. He had the logos because when he talked about things, he talked about things in a way that people accepted. And he had the pathos as well because he was able to emotionally trigger the British people to be with him. But here's my point, brothers and sisters, and I hope I haven't lost you. Inshallah, have I lost you? Are you with me? Okay, inshallah. Here's the point. This same guy is responsible for starving 3 million people in modern-day Bangladesh. How many people? 3 million people. Why? Because at a certain time when India was experiencing a famine, number 1, instead of giving them the wheat that they had access to, he said that we need to store up this wheat for our soldiers in case they need it later on. Number 2, the rice that India was producing, he forced India to export that rice to countries like the UK so they could enjoy their fine Indian basmati rice. Right? This guy was a tyrant. He was a cruel tyrant, but yet they say he was a great speaker. And this is where we have to be careful. That sometimes we look at things in a very superficial level and we say that, oh, that speech was just a great speech. The speaker was such a great speaker. Why? Well, I was so engaged, right? I didn't even look at my phone once during the whole speech from the beginning to the end. Let's think about this a bit, right? What really makes a good speech? I'm going to give you a hadith here. Okay, this is an important hadith. The hadith is narrated from Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam. Can we have a salawat that's befitting of lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam? There was one time when Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was speaking to the people and there was somebody who came to him and he said that Yabna Rasulullah. He wasn't one of the Shias. But this is what he said. He goes, Yabna Rasulullah, O the son of Messenger of Allah. Inna hadha jawharan. Meaning that what you said right here, it was gold. It was diamond. It was just incredible. Right? Your speech is like gold and diamond. Right? What does the Imam al-Islam say to him in response to that? He says to him that, oh, so-and-so, you have actually put our speech below the level it's at. Because after all, isn't gold and diamond just a rock? It's a physical thing that you take and you use it for ornaments, for physical ornaments. Isn't it just a rock? Meaning what? Meaning that the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam is something which goes beyond worldly measures. These secular ways of measuring the worth of a speech, they limit things to what happens just during that time that you're connected to that speaker, you're present in that gathering. But the reality of what happens from the Mimbar of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, when we're talking about the message of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, it's in a different world which is much more vast and much more profound than this world. One of my teachers, he was narrating this story recently. He said that he was giving a speech and he mentioned a supposedly simple hadith about the importance of Salat al-Rahim and not doing aq of walidain. Meaning what? Meaning that you have to keep close ties with your family and you have to make sure that you don't cut your ties with your parents. And the hadith, the gist of it is that if you cut your ties with your parents, it brings about grief in your life. So he says that he gave that hadith. And then after the speech, there was a young man who came to him. And the young man says, Hajj Agha, I have to talk to you. So he said, what is it? He says that it's been 20 years that I've had some problems. I've been going from place to place, trying everything to be able to cure these problems I'm having. But when you said that hadith, something clicked for me. And I made some phone calls, and 20 minutes later, for the first time, I'm feeling so much better. And I think it's because of my reconnecting with my parents. So what happened is that hadith of the Ahlul Bayt, it was something that Allah had placed in my teacher's speech for that person to be able to take and benefit from. I don't know if he had ethos for that person. I don't know if he had pathos. I don't know if he had logos. But what he did have is he was using the words of light from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and conveying them to the people. And so we have to be careful not to fall into this trap. Otherwise what happens is that you have people who are not trained professional speakers like myself. Sometimes, we come and people are like, oh man, I want somebody who's like dynamite. And they're like, pounding their fist on the mimbar and like, I don't know, fireworks and like, making us laugh at one time and making us cry at the other time. We want that type of speech. And we're like, hey, this is what I can give. But what I can do and what I am doing, inshallah, is giving ayat of the Quran and ahadith of Ahlul Bayt. And it's not the speech itself, but rather what it's connected to that we hope is going to be the solution to our problems and a healing for us when we come to these majalis. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Divine promises. Imam Hussain alayhi salam, there is a very famous saying that's attributed to him. And I'm sure most of you have heard this before. It's interesting that this hadith is reported that he said it at least twice. There was one time when he met the poet Farazdaq. I think those of you who are familiar with the history, Farazdaq was a famous poet who he had, a type of affinity for Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And what happened was that he was coming from Kufa and he meets Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Imam Hussain alayhi salam asks him about the people of Kufa. And what does Farazdaq say? The famous words. He says that قُلُوبُهُمْ مَعَكُمْ وَسُيُوفُهُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. Meaning that the hearts of the people of Kufa are with you, but their swords are against you. They're not going to join you in any military excursion. And their faith is weak, right? And then Imam Hussain says something interesting. He says that Farazdaq sadaqta, you have spoken truthfully. And then he goes on to say a couple of lines which are really key. Those same lines, according to some narrations, Imam Hussain says when he and his family and his companions arrive in Karbala, which is what we're commemorating tonight. So it's very relevant for us to look at these lines. What does he say? It's a famous saying. He says, Inna nasa abidud dunya. Indeed, people, meaning that people in general, right? Obviously not everyone, but people in general are slaves of what? They're slaves of the material world, the lowly part of the existence. And then what is it about them that when it comes to the religion, they follow the religion and they support the religion as long as their worldly life is good. Meaning that as long as it doesn't like affect their comfort and they still are able to like, sort of live comfortably, then they are going to practice the religion. وَإِذَا مُحِّصُوا بِالْبَلَاءِ قَلَّتِ الدَّيَانُونَ. Right? When people are tested, then those who are committed to the path of religion are very few. These lines are very profound. And usually you'll find that in Muharram, at one point, the speakers will mention these lines because of how relevant they are to the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But sisters, one of the things we're going to try to get from these speeches is what was the angize, what was the motivation behind Imam Hussein doing what he did? What did he want to awaken people to? So it's very important here that Imam Hussein alayhi salam is trying to say to people, one of the things we takeaways we can get from this is that wherever you're at in terms of your practice of religion, my invitation for you is for you to be able to step up to a higher level where when things happen, things don't go your way, calamity descends, you have financial problems, you have family problems, you have parenting problems, you have economic problems, you have political problems, whatever it may be. When those things happen, there should be something within you that prevents you from departing the path of religion. What is that thing within that prevents somebody from departing the path of religion when they get shaken up? And this is where I want to take all of us to the current events. I don't want to be somebody who spends 10 nights living in a different world of the past. That's not the type of person I am. We need to look at how we connect all of this to what's happening right now. I mentioned last night about the incredible crime on humanity that continues to take place in occupied Palestine. Brothers and sisters, when it comes to these events that have taken place, I see that believers fall into different categories. There are some who have literally watched a genocide being live streamed to them, at various extents. Maybe they check in once a day, once every few days, but they see the images, they see the video clips, and they are literally in a state of shock. They don't know how to process what they see. I mean, if I just open up my social media, I have to look away, because one of those images or one of those clips is enough for a week or more than a week. But the question is, how do we process that? There's others who have said that, I don't know how to process it, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it off. Right? I'm going to shut myself off from what's happening there. I'm going to worry about my own sphere of things, just really not knowing what to do about that. And of course, there's others who have found various ways of taking inspiration, or let's say trying to understand what their taklif is and their responsibilities when it comes to these events, and they're trying various things. But what I'd like to do, inshallah, is to look at it from this perspective, that I know that personally, there's very little that I can do directly to help those people who are being oppressed and killed and subjugated. Because the powers that be that are doing this, I don't personally have too much that I can do to stand up in front of them. But inshallah, in the long term, we want to do a lot. And Allah Ta'ala has, of course, a lot planned. What I can do is that even though I acknowledge my inability to be able to help them, yes, I can give donations, yes, I can, raise my voice when I have to, and I should, and I will, inshallah. But what I can do is, rather than being able to give them a lot, even though I would like to, I can actually take something from them. What can I take from them? I can take from them a reminder about what Iman and what faith is supposed to do for somebody. What I can take from them is that وَإِذَا مُحِّسُوا بِالْبَلَاءِ, when people are tested with affliction, then قَلَّتِ الدَّيَانُونَ, what we see from them is the images, along with all that destruction and horror, we see these incredible images. That one elderly gentleman who has a smile on his face while he's standing in front of his house, which is in rubbles. And they're asking him, and they're saying that, what are you going to do? Right? They just destroyed your house. Who knows what other loss he had faced by that time. And what he is doing is he has a smile on his face, and he's saying that Allah will take care of me. What is this? This is Iman. Iman of what? Iman meaning having faith in the promises of Allah. And this is something that personally I feel is such an important discussion for us to have, especially at this time. When we see these people who have been, for decades, they have been under oppression, and in recent times under unimaginable conditions, but yet no one has been able to take their Iman from them. And rather, it has only increased. This is definitely an ayah and a lesson for us. And so that is the inspiration for our speeches. Speech say salawat. We want to go back and forth. We're going to go back and forth from history to current times, to the hadith, to Gaza. And now I'm going back to the Quran. I'm going back to the story of the magicians of Fir'aun. These magicians were in the elite class. But it seems that even though they were elite, there was still something that they were lacking. And so what happened is that when the Pharaoh invited them to perform their magic, they had a question for their Pharaoh. What did they say? This is from Surah Al-Shu'ara. فَلَمَّا جَاءَ أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فَلَمَّا جَاءَ السَّحَرَةُ قَالُوا لِفِرْعَوْنَ أَإِنَّا لَنَا أَجْرًا إِن كُنَّا نَحْنُ الْغَالِبِينَ. They say to the Pharaoh that what? That, O Pharaoh, if we are ghalib, if we're victorious, then are we going to get some reward for you? From you. Okay, now think about all those people, all those sellout countries and those sellout political leaders and the sellout political candidates, even domestically, who sell their souls to, what is that, the AIPAC and the Zionist entities and those countries that bow down to the global oppression. Right? These magicians of Fir'aun, they're a symbol for us, for people who are looking for promises from human beings. So what does that promise? They're like, are you going to promise us something? Are we going to get our ajr? Are we going to get our reward if we're the ones who are victorious? And what does Fir'aun say? What does Pharaoh say? He says that, قَالَ نَعَمْ وَإِنَّكُمْ إِذًا لَمِنَ الْمُقَرَّبُونَ. Yes, indeed, you're going to get your reward, and you're going to be among those who are close to me. You're going to gain the inner circle. You're going to be part of the Security Council. Right? I don't know, whatever it is. Right? You're going to be part of the inner circle. So there's these promises. Where are these promises being issued from? They're promises being issued from human beings. Right? And when we're looking at this, we're like, this is so foolish. Right? You're saying, in kunna nahnu al-ghalibin. We know that who is the ghalib? The ghalib is Allah Ta'ala. Right? There is no one who has independent ghalaba, and there's no one who can have independent victory in the creation of Allah unless Allah gives them permission to. So this type of thinking is so shirky. It's so filled with polytheistic type of thought. So what happens? Eventually, فَأَلْقَوْا حِبَالَهُمْ وَعِصِيَهُمْ. They threw down, they cast their nets, they cast their ropes. and they did this great magic. وَقَالُوا بِعِزَّةِ فِرْعَوْنَ إِنَّا لَنَحْنُ الْغَالِبُونَ. They said that, oh, for sure we're going to be victorious. What is the promise? What is the reason for their confidence and their victory? It's because of the promise of Fir'aun. Right? So they're looking at the promise of a human being and they're saying that's what's going to carry us through this particular trial and this test that we have. And then what happens, you know the story. فَأَلْقَى مُوسَى عَصَاهُ فَإِذَا هِيَ تَلْقَفُ مَا يَأْفِكُونَ. When Musa threw his staff, it swallowed up everything that they had cast. All their plans are destroyed. All their hopes are dashed. But what happens? فَأُلْقِيَ السَّحَرَةُ سَاجِدِينَ. Allah has something in mind for them. They are also cast down. But now this false notion of hope they had in human beings is now destroyed. What happens? قَالُوا آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Suddenly they've been given this beautiful gift of Iman. And then what happens is that Rabbi Musa wa Harun, then Fir'aun threatens them. He says that I'm gonna torture you. I'm going to cut off your hands and your feet. I'm going to put you on the cross. What are you going to do at that time? What do they say? They say, La dair. Right? This is no concern to us. Because now their hope in a human being has been replaced with hope in Allah Ta'ala. And when hope with Allah comes, then nothing can stand in the way of the people who have that hope. This is the message of the Quran. And this is what we're seeing being enacted in front of our own eyes. That's being live streamed to our own eyes. This is a message for us, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, in the upcoming nights, we want to go through this topic of the promises of Allah. We want to talk about why is it that sometimes we have more faith in the promises of human beings than we have faith in the promise of Allah. We want to talk about the false promises of the shaitan. We want to talk about some of the specific promises of Allah in this world and when it comes to our next world, which is our hereafter. And inshallah, we want to talk about the promise of divine victory that inshallah Allah will give to the oppressed, especially in Palestine. Peace and salawat. Brothers and sisters, tonight is the second night of the month of Muharram, and on this night we want to remember the event of the arrival of the caravan of Imam Hussein alayhi salam into Karbala. I want to give a few points of background and inshallah we'll mention the zikr and musibat. It had been 24 days that the caravan of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam had been traveling from Makkah to eventually they end up in this land. They were destined to go towards Kufa, but the army of Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi was dispatched to prevent them from going to Kufa. And Al-Hurr was commanded, he said that whatever you do, don't leave them, and whatever you do, don't let them go to Kufa. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam's caravan is journeying, and eventually they get to a point where there's a rider that comes from Kufa towards them. And so both sides are waiting there, and they're waiting to see what this rider, what message he will convey. So when he comes, he speaks to Al-Hurr, and he says to him that there's a command from the Amir, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and he has ordered me to tell you that you should prevent Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his army from coming any closer to Kufa. And I will stay with you to make sure that you follow this command. And there was somebody who then asks him, he says that, why are you doing this? You know, it's as if he could see that this is such a cruel thing. We're in the middle of a desert here. Here's a man who's the grandson of the Prophet. And along with him, there are young people, there are women, there are children, and you're making them stop in the middle of a desert? What kind of, this has no logic to it. Why are you doing this? So he says that because I am a faithful and obedient servant and soldier of Yazid. La'natullahi alayh. So one of them cries out. He says that, he quotes an ayah from the Quran where Allah Ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَدْعُونَ إِلَى النَّارِ وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ لَا يُنْصَرُونَ. That are you going to follow these as an imam, somebody who calls you towards the fire of hell, and on the day of judgment they will not be helped? You see, I'm mentioning this on purpose because I want to make sure that we understand how important the Quran was as part of the events that took place in Karbala. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah, Sallallahu alayka ayyuha al-mazlum al-atshan al-maqtulu bi-ardi Karbala. Peace and blessings be upon you, O lantern of guidance, O ship of salvation, O grandson of Messenger of Allah, O son of Ali and Fatima. Peace and blessings be upon you and your blessed lips that were dry and thirsty as you lay in the sands of Karbala. When the incident of the soldier from Kufa takes place, Imam Hussein alayhi salam realizes that they will not be able to advance towards Kufa. He asks them, he says, tell me, what is the name of this land? They tell him that this land is called Karbala. Imam Hussein alayhi salam immediately cries out, A'udhu billahi min al-karbi wal-bala. I seek refuge in Allah from all karb, which means distress, and bala, which means affliction. And then he says something very interesting. He says that there was a time when I was with my father, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. We were passing through this same land. And my father, Imam Ali alayhi salam, told us at that time, he says, Ha huna mahattu rikabihim wa mahraqu dimaihim. My father told us at that time that this is the place where the riders will dismount. This is the place where their blood will be spilled. We were curious to know, and we asked my father, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, which people are you talking about? Which people are you remembering from now? Which people are you foretelling will be in this land and they will dismount and their blood will be spilled? He told us that there will be some people from Ali Bayti Muhammad, there will be some people from the Ahlul Bayt. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam realizes that these people he was referring to was none other than him and his family and his companions. So he cries out, Ha huna mahattu rihalina. This is the place where we will dismount. Wa masfaku dima'ina. This is the place where our blood will be spilled. وَهَا هُنَا مَحَلُّ قُبُورِنَا. This is the land which is going to be the location of our graves. Brothers and sisters, we can imagine at that point when Imam Hussein alayhi salam gives the order for everyone to dismount, for the tents to be set up. We can imagine that he and his brother and his nephews and all those who were there were helping the women and children. They must have lent them a hand as they dismounted from the horses and the camels. They must have protected them from the view of the enemy soldiers as they set up their tents and their camp. But there will come a time 10 days later when there will be no protection from the gaze of the enemy soldiers. They will see those same tents that were pitched, and they will go and attack them, and they will go and loot them. There will come a time when the women and the children have to mount on those horses and then the camels, but they will not have the support and the help of Hussein alayhi salam and Abbas alayhi salam. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.